This will be based on a RPG mentoring riff. Not only do I like the RPG riff for the MMORPG of like the Spectrum Pathways, it's sort of based on that, as I may have mentioned in some other filmings, but when it comes to teaching someone how to be a hero in a world, these RPG systems are really good at it. There's some really great principles. And one we'll be following, it works really well, is that in most worlds you start and you learn the powers, or the attributes, I guess we're saying it. For us it's the pod powers. But if you're playing like Dungeons and Dragons or something else like that, it'll be strength, constitution, wisdom, charisma. The basic building blocks of a human or a creature in that world. From there, you learn the classes that can be played. What can you be a fighter or a magic user or whatever? For us, that would relate to the character or creature forms, like the Hidden Grove Guardian. Then you would pick what kind of I'm sorry, like I relate to the Spectrum Pathways. You have like the ritual requirements is like a ritualist, and the Mojo Dojo has like a Mojoist. So those are the possible like subdivisions of skill sets. Then the individual races, for example, you might have like elves and dwarves and hobgoblins or whatever you want to call them, hobbits, anything like that, halflings, is that affects how you play any of those other character classes. So the attributes would relate to pod powers. The character classes, so character attributes equals pod powers. Character classes equals the Spectrum Pathways. And the character races or species that you can play would relate to the creature forms or the heroic manifestations, the major ones, obviously, and all their subdivisions. From there, you'd want to have the look and feel of the world, so how you get into character, and so that will be the series of levels that focuses on the what exactly about you makes you the Mojo you are. So when you look in the mirror, you can see it. You're like, that's me. And so, kind of like a method actor, you always want to feel like every interaction makes you feel like you are that character. You want to be able to see your physiological cues, so every time you do see yourself, you're like, man, I am a Nijai, or whatever it is you are. And then finally, in role-playing games, you have to have modules or adventures to go on. And so that will be the A to Z of your Mojo and all the things you do, like learning and romance and career and relaxation, all those kinds of things. And kind of like missions. A mission to relax, a mission to do this, whatever. This ability we have is so incredible, so rare, it's such a value to use it on other people and to train them in it, that we really don't want to deal with people who have toxic energy, and we also don't want to deal with people who, which I mean pretty much means the same thing, but who have ideological beliefs that are very off from ours. So there's the toxic energy issue. There's also people who want to take the Mojo reading and leave the rest of Podler theory. They don't like the spirituality angle or this and that. And well, then I wish I had not even bothered having my interns read them, because why? The goal of Podler is to help train heroes. So a person who has a problem with spirituality, well, that angle that we promote so strongly here on the site, and the revolutionary angle, for example, the revolutionary angle, the spiritual angle, the artistic angles, these are all integral to the scientific, so we're not going to separate them. And so we really just want to separate ourselves from those people, and we want to make it obvious what our position is, so that it's obvious why we are declining to do that. So, but I actually think it's going to get us the people we want, because the principles that we ask people to be cool with are really obvious, like, you know, being cool with all kinds of race and colors and sexual orientations, and being okay with evolution, and stuff like that. So, like, honestly, if you're not down with that, I don't really want to be, not only don't want to read you, I don't mind interns reading you, I really don't want us emailing each other, I don't want to converse with you, I really just sail on by. I mean, okay, yeah, I don't know what's going on with you that you actually aren't cool with those things, but yeah, keep on trucking and get better. You'll probably have fun doing this right now, and it does take a little while to assemble these playlists, so if you want to start on it now, it'll probably be a good idea. Do you want to tell me what you're doing?
Yeah, I've been going through just kind of my list of known Nijai, and whatever jumps out to me about their like particular riff or game playing style, everything from like positive to negative, or like their profession or their personality, like different things, just different categories that my mind sorts them into. So like I don't know, musicians or avant-garde or cagey or sweet, shy, like whatever. So
Definitely.
it's a lot of fun.
Definitely. And that right there is just one genre. That's when you know the mojo or you want to know, and that's a particular kind of playlisting. There are other kinds. For example, rituals. There are the rituals we talked about.
Yeah, it's fun to take the music, whatever spirit forms, chords and rituals that people are reaching in music videos and putting those into playlists like Fumasta and Dario.
Exactly, and this does not have to be mojo specific. It simply moves you in that way.
Yeah.
For example, one thing you'll find is that there are a lot of romantics that happen to do that. So lots of mojos can actually gain that access through watching another mojo reach it. Do you know what I mean? I think so. That's something to recognize.
It's also a good idea to have lists of like people of your mojo or other mojos that are particularly strong and like really weak and stuff like that too, for compare and contrast.
Absolutely.
And that also gets into the spirit forms.
It does. And we won't be able to do as much of that in the beginning, obviously, because we don't have as many samples. We want to bring the samples out slowly as we get really in depth. But as we do that, you want to, as she's saying, put them in these categories because it really will help your Sonomnia a great deal to be able to see them as categories, watch them as categories. It helps build a tacit artistic repertoire, and it really can only work in that way. But you also, in the meantime, anything that makes you think of certain powers, Ji, Jai, it doesn't actually have to be mojos that are doing it, it simply needs to inspire you. For example, I sometimes watch scenes that actually have certain Jai in them, or Ji in them, because it inspires my Ji. Do you mean like that? It just, that gets my Ji going. Other times, it gets another power going, and it could be the same mojo or different mojo. So, motifs are very complex, so you really want to take the motif over the mojo when it comes to things like this, the spirit forms and things of that nature. Also, you want to note motifs such as interactions that you find intriguing or unpleasant. That's something to actually study even without knowing their mojo, and later on, this can be really good training, is what she's talking about, is note how you feel about someone in those categories, but you don't have to know what their mojo is yet. Humans have been doing this for a very long time. Mojo reading is just a new thing we're doing now, but I mean, humans' brains naturally do it for usefulness. But you can come back when you're wiser, when you know more, and you can find out, interesting, that's kind of where I was then. So things that you think are cool, people that are cool, scenes you think are cool, things you don't like, but just categorize them. And then over time, you can start to read some of these people and start to realize, interesting, I wouldn't put them in that same category now, or I would interpret different. So that's really can be a very fascinating study, because you're wondering about your development and assessing where it is and then how it goes on. That's very good to video yourself, which we're doing a lot of the leveling up processes, so you can see yourself in video, but also noting how you took other video or other things, like an interview that's on the web, is noting, oh, I put them in this category because I feel this way about it, and then after such amount of education, they are put into a more positive category, a more negative category, or maybe just a laterally different category, not better or worse, just, oh, actually it's over here now. And so you're like, it's fascinating not only to watch yourself visually grow, but you can look at the way you record things or categorize things, and you can literally see your brain growing, because you can see how your brain had categorized things or understood things, and then you come back to it. You know, like grappling students, you know, you watch like old footage of yourself, and you can see yourself moving, and you're like, I was moving like that because I did not know this move I know now, because I would not move like that now. It looks so foreign to you, and it can make you feel like, wow, I've really come a long way. And it teaches you that you're going to think that way about that you. Every you are now looks back at the old ones going, man, they didn't know what they were doing. But there's a whole bunch more ahead that think the same thing about you. So it keeps you humble, but also keeps you ambitious. Nijai. You are going to notice, for example, with both Marianne Cotillard and Julianne Moore, what do you call it, sort of like a dreamy, impressionistic quality that the adaptive romantics have. There is more of a sort of fairy, impish pixie quality when the Ni is above the Zhai, but when the Zhai is above, there's a more of a siren-like soulfulness to it. But both the adaptive romantics, they'll share that quality. Another quality they both have is they can talk in a stream of consciousness type way, which is Ni and Zhai. They're kind of talking ideas, they kind of look dreamy, and their head kind of bounces a little bit. It's very, very cute and awesome. And I know, it's awesome. This is sort of like a poetical stream of consciousness with no real structure or ending to it. That's the signature of both of them. But there will be more what we call the bobbleheadedness. That will be more so with the Ni Zhai over the Zhai Ni, and more of the swaying with the Zhai Ni. But there will be both bobbleheadedness and swaying, Zhai swaying with both of them. So it's a proportion thing. Let's talk about Zai with Ji. So in the case of the Nai Ji, like Leonardo DiCaprio and Matt Damon, both of them actually have, Matt Damon and G9, have very good Zai. The difference is going to be Matt Damon is a discernment first. That means the curtaining of emotion and neutralization actually extends into his eyes. So it's going to be more difficult for Matt Damon to hold himself in a neutral expression. And when he does, it'll look more perturbed. Whereas Leonardo DiCaprio is still going to have the passionate nature of a director romantic, but Zaiing himself will be easier to do, being controlled. Another aspect is that Leonardo, being a Naiji, is subjective, which means there is more comfortability when being inside in the chilly mode. So all mojos that have Zai, but they have it as the subjective power when they are objective, it is more like a chilly braking system, but not like a tower or cloak you go into. Look for that. You'll see a retreating inside with DiCaprio that you won't see with Damon. Whereas Damon does have excellent Zai and he controls himself very well, but you don't see the retreating inside that very disassociated way. And actually, Matt Damon played a very dissociated character, which is almost certainly an IG, in The Talented Mr. Ripley. And he did so very believably. But if you know what you're looking for, there is still more an openness to him. He is not actually truly disassociated, although he does a very good impression of it. But note the voice. The voice is a good indicator. There's a treble to the voice of the G Alpha. It's a very buttery sort of so he can Zai that, but it makes his voice sound very, very flat. Now Zai always does that to some degree, but on a G Alpha it's more noticeable. On DiCaprio, when he Zais himself, it mainly makes him sound more cagey. Being subjective already with Nai, he kind of seems a bit distant. Then he seems distant and cold. So it's very interesting because they're both direct romantics and they have the same 4 powers, but it does come off quite different between the two of them. Then the G. The G of Matt Damon, if you see him in interviews, is more comfortable in the environment. Even when he's not doing well. Not that he does bad, he does very well for himself. But there's lulls. In fact, if you're an objective, you might not even know what I'm talking about. But if you're subjective, those are scary. He doesn't have that. He has a more, and I mean this in a good way, a hammy humor that is, like objective adaptives, is more good-natured and accepting that the environment's cool. He's got more of a cool, like that's okay. DiCaprio is also quite funny himself, but if you watch him, he's funny and he's very good-natured. But there is an uncomfortability with the environment. And he hides it well, but he definitely has more HSP than, say, someone like Matt Damon, who, anyone who has Nye and Nye Strong, particularly have G with it because it makes you moody, they're going to have that kind of nature. But DiCaprio looks to me like gaining comfortability is something he's always striving for wherever he goes. And I don't think you see any interview where he's not doing that. Where he may seem extremely masterful because he's done a good job. If you look at some of his earlier interviews, he had less hold of himself, but that's because his eye wasn't as strong then. Not that it was weak, it was strong, but wasn't as strong as it is now. But the G was well developed early on and stylized his mannerisms into interesting mannerisms. And so that's something to note, is that a G like DiCaprio who has good G to hide their HSP, you'll still note this. Like myself, I always know what my hands are doing. And right now, I'm holding them. It's comfortable, it doesn't look like it's weird. That's because my Zai is comfortable doing that. But every time I kind of touch them down, my Zai holds them. When they're up in the air, my G moves them. If I don't, I'll get more like this. And you'll notice Nai G, and some of them actually don't have HSP anywhere near as bad as mine, but they have not developed G to style it, and they not developed Zai to do this. So they can tend to have very almost jittery looking movements. DiCaprio looks like he has substantial HSP, and so early on you can almost see a jitteriness in him, but I would relate it a bit to Topher Grace, in that although he has much of a leading man thing now, but even back when he was much younger and not so much a leading man way, he stylized his gestures to make them interesting and appealing. Does that make sense? And likable and good-natured, to show goodwill. Because sometimes the jitterness of Naiji not only can make you seem like you're weird and out there or something, it can also make other people uncomfortable. So that's something to note, is that shows a Naiji who feels a discomfort in the environment but takes the tact of being charismatic to try and feel the way. But the discomfort is there. I don't know what went on and on there, but there's some depth for you there, and we can talk more in the forums. Cues of source power signals. Okay, well, with Matt Damon, I sense caring and then the dissatisfied, but definitely caring first. I get warmth from him. That's the first energy coming off him to me. DiCaprio, very similar configuration, but being a Naiji, it is dissatisfied first. I just get off him that he is most comfortable in a state of dissatisfaction, hanging around other people who are in a state of being dissatisfied and they want to go to a higher level. Not that Matt Damon is not also extremely ambitious. He also is, and he's a great professional and very, very good. He's great. But I get caring first. That's the first signal I get off of him, and a desire to connect. I get a tentative, a qualified desire to connect off of DiCaprio. So the G is there, but it's qualified by the Nai. If it's going to work out okay. Where with Matt Damon, that's more the assumption, and then he's cunning, which gives him a lot of confidence, not self-possession, so he's sure it's going to go good. If it doesn't, he'll handle himself. So it's a different, very similar, but it is different. With Marion Cotillard, there's going to be sort of a vivaciousness, a sort of revolutionary joie de vivre character, but also a poignancy and a really there quality, an authenticity you can hold on to, makes you feel safe. So she has both the Ni and the Jai, but first there's like this sense of adventure. That's the main thing kind of coming off of her character and her psyche. Julianne Moore, also very adventurous, but the first thing I get is the depth of feeling. That just hits me right off the bat, just sort of like a poem. She's like a walking poem, which has the magical knee whimsicalness to it, but that's not the first thing that hits me. The first thing that hits me is that soulfulness. So both awesome, but with Marion Cotillard, knee over Jai, Julianne Moore, Jai Renee. Vocal cues, again, you'll note with DiCaprio, the G, the butter, he has very good butter, but like me, being a Nai G, when I'm doing this right now, I can't help it, it's part of my charm too. It doesn't go on my eyes. I can't make the G go in my eyes, my Nai. I'm G'ing, but still, I can see my Nai, I can't help it.
I think you're gonna hurt yourself, stop.
So, I'm here always. Yeah, even when it goes all the way up, it doesn't, I'm still squintily there. Where, with Matt Damon, there will be a complete taking over the face sometimes. And when Zine, so the face doesn't move, Jinai's faces are held more completely immobile. Because the curtaining goes up here. So if the G goes up, if you stop it, you must stop this whole stretch. Naiji, it's different. The emotion, the G comes up, but not to the brim, past the brim line, but also means I can Zai this down. But you notice my eyes are not Zai'd. That's important. My neutralizing expression range and also for DiCaprio does not go into the eyes. So I can basically light it up and put it down. But while this is happening, my eyes are really a totally separate operation. Well, they are with the Jinai as well, except that operation is under that operation. So that curtaining actually goes over it. But my eyes, that, if you can think of like a layer, that layer actually comes stronger because of perception first, and it comes down, overlapping the expression range. So that will cause more of a cagey quality in the facial. I mention this in detail now because the vocal range shares this. With DiCaprio, as opposed to Damon, there will be a, like with my voice, my butter's there, it is easy for me, I'm good at it, it's natural for me, but hello, hi there. There's a, can you hear it? There's a slight reluctance. I can't take it on my voice. There's a slight reluctance, and that's when I start talking, I talk fast. Because I'm standing here. And when I come out in my voice, I have to kind of like throw the energy up. If you listen to Damon's voice, it'll be more of a flowing, consistent, it's more soothing. So there's they both have butter, they're both direct romantics, but there's a cagier quality to DiCaprio's voice, and just will be, and there's a more soothing quality to Damon's because of the G being higher. Marion Cotillard is going to have the Jai coming above the midline of her voice, but there's also a, I can't even do it, I'm making this up, but there's a, that right there, there's a buoyancy, we talk about bobbleheadedness, there's a bobbliness in the voice, a bubbliness, I guess would be a better way of saying it. And with the Nijai, that bubbly quality, because that relates actually to reception, like the eyes, that will still be there above the poignancy, although there will be these very heartfelt connection points. But it'll be bubbly, connect and resonate, bubbly, connect and resonate. But the sort of the bubbly quality is the baseline. With the Jaini, it'll be the poignancy, the soulfulness, like this sort of deep intensity, a passion to it. And then the Ni, as opposed to say a Jai V, adds a magical quality, an etherealness to it. So it's like poetic and soulful, and then magical. Poetic, soulful, magical. So, but there's a heavier, more held quality being a subjective discernment. Make sense? One we notice a lot is we try to figure out which ones are Naji and which ones are G9 just by looking before we see them. And a few things we look for. One is jutting. Every fighter has a natural way they kind of hold their body. If you notice the G9 versus Naji in interviews, even Matt Damon, who's a very likable, affable guy, he gets forward a lot. There's a lot more forward coming forward, and it's even pleasant, but he is forward more. Jinai fighters, they hold their shoulders and face forward more. There's more of a bulldog quality to it. Where with the Naiji, you see more of a little bit of sort of serpentine quality. One is the Nai being above it means the perception's above it, so they tend to have more of a broken rhythm, an unusual sort of hypnotic rhythm than the Jinai. Although the Jinai also have it to a great degree as well, which is why they do so well. But another part of that is the Naiji being subjective. They just don't jut as much, and they tend to have similar humor. Instead of ba ba ba, wait for the laugh. There's more zing and fuck you, or ha ha, or whatever. And so in the fight, there is that quality of bop bop, and then you're funny to me. Where the Jinai also, in their whole way of moving, there's a little more showmanship because the G is higher and as is the V. So they tend to want to show more and they need to show more, and they use that as a way of showing the opponent by stone facing that they're not weak, and also by riling up the other person. Both the direct romantics do that, but the Naiji tend to take the tact of doing more stone facing, not showing anything, and then sudden savage displays of visceral activity. So the rhythm tends to be more similar to the talking, which is lull, monologue, and they fight the way they talk. So Jinai and Naiji are both very good at using their energy to get a conversation to go the way they want. These pretty much show up almost tit for tat in their fighting. So the Jinai tends to agitate the environment more in any scenario in order to use the Nai. The Nai not being as high up, it doesn't want to be fed as much, and it needs more in order to work. The Ji needs to be fed constantly, and it can agitate the environment on a consistent basis, which makes things pop up, show themselves, and then the Nai can pick them up. The Jinai will use this way of doing things in the ring. It will use more use of aggression in order to see if you can psych the person with that on an ongoing thing. So I don't want to just pigeonhole, but there is more of a machismo to the Jinai. Naiji also sort of have it, but it tends to be a bit more psycho. So psycho and macho. Apparently being psycho and macho makes you good at fighting, because those two mojos just really dominate. If you were, not to put people down, these are just statistics, there's like, in like the level of MMA that you see on TV, unfortunately, you don't really see any adaptives. There's very few. I think there might be one like Brock Lesnar, might be a Visa. I have to look them up more. But it's not very common. And when you see it, was that?
Except in the women's.
In the women's, there are more women adaptives. That's interesting to note. So we have to study that more. But
I just read a string of them. I was like, oh my god, there's a lot of female.
No, and Nijai. There's actually quite a few top Nijai fighters, female. But
I think both of the, I don't want to derail this too much.
No, it's
both of their others also, if you boot it up, because like Naiji and Jinai, when they boot up their others with that dancing knee quality, and then the Nishai and the Shiny booting up their others with the World Frenzy aggressive.
Definitely.
So you also see the spirit forming also in the fighting.
Absolutely. Essentially, we have not seen male adaptive romantics. Not yet. They will hold their hands differently. You'll mainly see this when they're not in some specific motion, because you're doing a specific motion, there's just a kinetically perfect way to do it. But in between every motion, there are these lulls where you go back into your natural stance before you shift to the next maneuver. The adapters will have a looser wrist that feels more natural to them. There's also not as much attempt to dominate the other person psychologically. For adaptives, a lot of times that's excessive mental effort that's taking them out of their wheelhouse. So why do that? You stick with your adaptive powers and then use your directed ones to modulate. But for directives, not only can they do it, they kind of need to do it. So you rarely see a directive out there who's not trying to do that to the other person. Leonardo DiCaprio. He actually has as a good example because he actually has a really good use of pretty much all his powers. But one thing I think you find fascinating is being an actor. A lot of times there is a assuming of one of sort of various characters within you for periods of time. They can go on for a whole movie, or it can go on for years sometimes. So for example, in the case of Leonardo, he has early on in his career a lot more G, but as typically happens in the early 20s of Nai G, that inhibits being seen as leading man. It's too emo. So you'll notice a lot more of a shutting down of that or turning into this, which believe it or not actually has a lot to do with Zai, because Zai goes into G. It's really one spectrum. It's kind of like butter, baleful, stone face. Stone face is a removal emotion, butter is positive emotion, and baleful is kind of in between. So baleful actually a lot of times is like G with the Zai, not cool, not happy with things. Same way the Z and Zhai can go that way, to where Zhai's displeasure can mix with Z to show.
In that case, aggression.
Aggression, exactly. Again, it comes as very logic-based aggression, but it's a fired-up logic-based aggression. So with Leonardo, I would say that he actually went through a classic period. You kind of watch this, you might get some good info here, where he was very Nai heavy early on, and his G was not really able to come out as much as his level of ego, in a good way I mean this, was wanting it to or should have it. But that's only because he was young and just needed to get his confidence up. As he progressed, the G came out much stronger, and then that's when his sort of like early leading, sort of like teen idol part came out, and so that was cool. And so he was much more funny, and he watched his interviews. He did a lot of things where he talked much more affably. Then around like you're see about like around 20 and on, the Zai is going to come in very heavily in order to be seen more as a leading man, because if you want to be seen as a leading man with G, you need to be able to give G and then stop it. And you also need to be able to scowl, because that's what men do, they scowl, damn it. And so if you want to scowl, it helps to use the Zai. And the Zai gives more gravitas. It gives, when the G says something, psychologically people think, couldn't you just knock them over if they said that to you? The Zai makes you think, no, they could take pushback. But these are development things people go through. Is there was an oversign, and that makes it difficult for his face to express like it should, and it makes it difficult for his voice to be as expressive as it should. And then I think he modulated it just right. And so I think he's actually now right at his peak and continuing to grow. So first kind of shy, Nai, HSP, but very likable. Then the G came out later, more in his teens. Because when you see him very young, before he even hit his teen idol, you're mainly struck with the eyes. That he looks very, very intelligent, and the movements are of a mind, a body that has a lot of energy to it. But the G ability to express itself was not up to it. Then in the teen idol days, the G gets to be up to able to articulate. But then there's the emo issue. So in the early 20s, Zai comes in heavy, and then probably late 20s coming to now is the nice correct modulation of lots of G, get into the Ian McClellan area where great G and the Zai there to get a nice steel modulated as required. So you train yourself to, like any animal who's hunting, to know what certain scents are like, to know then if something is similar or different to it. In the case of the Zai Alpha, there is a cleaner scent to it, because the chilliness is starting from that. It comes from a chilly equilibrium. It's a kind of peacefulness. With Naiji, for example, who do a lot of offside Zai frequently, the one thing that you usually see almost always is comes off immediately, before cold, hard. Whenever I see Naiji, that's the first thing that comes up to me is with their Zai is they look like they're hard. It doesn't matter they're scientists, doesn't matter they're gang leaders, doesn't matter they're actors. If they have a lot of Zai, they look hard and dangerous. Sharp. Hard and sharp. And cold. The ruthless, but it tends to come from the cold ruthless. Not just cold chilly, there's a much more of a Buddha-like vibe coming off of Zai Alpha, which I quite appreciate. The Zai of a Naiji will either be the lethal Zai of a fighter or a comedian, or it will be like an iron rain on the modulation in order to slice and dice like a Dawkins. It does not have the at ease quality. Which is why we often say with Naiji you can do a lot of Zai sometimes, even like going like the lethal cutting, they're like, we call it faux Zen, because they're not really Zen. They often feel, because their Nai sends them all kinds of crazy visions, their Ji makes their passions go up and down. They think they finally discovered this, ooh, the Zai button, I love this button. They think they found like the fountain of Zenness, but all they really found was their wonderful chilly equilibrium button, which is cool, but it will seem like they're numbing themselves. And if you know what you're looking for and you keep watching these, you'll notice the Naiji that are doing this have a not so much calm quality. Yeah, so not so much cold or chilly in a refreshing way, but more hard, sharp. And they're not calm, they're kind of like sleepy. They look a bit drugged up or disassociated. That's another one. Zai Alpha, ironically, as cold as they are not as dissociated usually as Naiji can be. And that's because, even though you would think Naiji would not be because we're touchy-feely being Ji, it's Nai. We're Nai first. So Nai is the first power, we're subjective, plus the Zai. It will tend to add to dissociation. Zai Alpha, as much as they talk they don't like people, they're more unaware of them. They don't actually detach. They dislike. They dislike the impingement of it. Nai is different. Nai doesn't like the impingement of anything and actually wishes to disassociate really from the other 7 powers. So it's inclined to do that. So with a Naiji, for example, and also Ji-Nai, when they really work that Zai up, it tends to be a little creepier. I'll be honest with you, because it's not like Zai just being, nice chilly bath. They're happy. There's actually a happiness to the Zai Alpha. They're like, it's not like super emotional, but they're pleased. Not with Naiji or Ji-Nai who are using it in that capacity. They're not pleased. They're hard. They're under control. They can control shit. That's the energy coming off of them. Even the Zen Buddhist-like ones, you know, the Dalai Lama, Naiji. That's not a happy man. That's not a happy man. He's not happy the way the world is. So, yeah. On all these analogies, you'll notice there's a flip because the Zai is serving something else. And when it's serving something else, the Zai is not being brought in just because chilliness feels good. I mean, it's usually being brought in for improvement. So it will have the feeling of hard, sharp, control. Zai Alpha really don't have this obsession necessarily with losing control. It's not going to happen a lot for them because active structure articulation is their polar power. They actually have to work themselves to peak to do that. The need for Xi to absolutely control something is more needed by those who are modulating with it. Because there's something, especially directed romantics, those mood swings, that needs to be modulated. So, hold that brake on. Yeah, with the directed romantics, for example, you'll definitely feel they're holding onto a brake, or they're numbing themselves, or anesthetizing them. Xi alpha, they're actually just chilling. They're just chilling out at the chilly tower. They're having a good old time. And like Vzi and Nizai, they're like, life's a game. Life's a chilly game, and you want to have fun with it, and you want to win too. With the director romantics, for example, life's hard. I'm really good at saying that. I'm really good at being hard. Most people actually around me are like, man, he knows I'm being hard. That doesn't make me a Xi alpha. In fact, that usually only comes from usually a director romantic's mother, G Mojo, who doesn't like how hard life is, but they've managed to Xi up for her. So it's a lot like, yeah, life's fucked. In fact, you watch like the gangster stuff when you watch like History Channel. There's so many gang leaders are like direct romantics, not even funny, and most of them are Xi'd up big time. But they look like just oozing rage and fear and keeping that shit locked down. That would be the energy likes. Ah, yes. Xi alpha has just almost no sound. Perfection needs no sound. With other mojos who, like the G mojos, you will not hear that. There will be a humming. Like this. See this? See, both direct romantics do this. So do the Vi G, so do the G Vi. It's faux casual. Like, I'm good. No, I'm not. I'm not. I want to move. I want to do things. I want to make the tribe go places. I want to get enlightened. I have shit I want to do. But I can pretend like I don't care. I can just pause myself. Xi will also have a pause button effect. If you naturally are doing stuff, Xi is, okay, timeout for what? To be hardcore, to be tactical, to be ruthless, what? But it's a timeout, and I don't want to be taking a timeout. But Xi alphas aren't taking timeout. They're hanging out. Big difference. Timeout versus hanging out.